The soft hum of computer fans and the faint scent of soldering iron were as much a part of Abigail Smith's childhood as bedtime stories and schoolyard games. Smith Tech Solutions, the small computer repair shop nestled on a quiet street corner, was her father's pride and joy. Established long before laptops became as common as coffee mugs, the shop had weathered technological revolutions and economic turbulence alike. Abigail, with her thick-rimmed glasses perpetually sliding down her nose, was the unofficial apprentice from the time she could hold a screwdriver. She spent countless hours dismantling outdated CPUs and learning the delicate art of motherboard repair under her father's patient guidance. "Steady hands, Abby," he'd say, his voice steady but warm. "This machine won't forgive a slip." Her older sister, Mia, however, spent those hours poring over textbooks at the dining table. With straight A's and a wall of academic trophies, Mia was the golden child. Their father, Arthur Smith, often joked, "One daughter fixes machines, the other fixes the world." It always stung Abigail in ways she couldn't quite articulate, though she never let it show. While Mia basked in the glow of her father's pride, Abigail worked quietly in the background, her technical skills growing sharper by the day. She dreamed not of fixing the machines forever, but of transforming Smith Tech into something more, a hub of innovation, a name that mattered in the tech world. Her ideas, however, went largely unnoticed. When she once suggested expanding into software installations or creating custom PCs, her father waved her off. "People come here for repairs, Abby, not bells and whistles," he'd said, his tone final. Abigail had nodded and retreated to her corner of the workshop, determined not to push. Mia's academic success culminated in an acceptance letter from a prestigious university. The family celebrated with a small dinner at the shop. Arthur couldn't stop beaming. "Mia's going to make us proud," he said, raising his glass. Abigail, from her usual spot at the workshop bench, merely smiled and toasted her sister. She felt happy for Mia, but couldn't shake the quiet ache that came from the realization that her contributions were invisible in her father's eyes. Yet, deep down, Abigail knew her path wasn't to shine in someone else's light. It was to create her own. Unbeknownst to anyone, she had been working on a plan, a vision for the shop that might one day prove her worth. All she needed was a chance. The glow of the computer screen bathed Abigail's face in pale blue as she worked late into the night. The workshop was quiet, save for the occasional crackle of a street lamp outside and the faint hum of the shop's equipment. Her father had gone home hours ago, leaving Abigail to her world of code and circuits. For months, she'd been working on a side project in secret. The idea had come to her during a mundane task, sorting invoices and receipts for Smith Tech's accounts. The inefficiency had frustrated her, and she couldn't help but think, there has to be a better way. With that seed of an idea, she began developing software tailored to small businesses like their own. It was a simple, practical program that combined inventory management, invoicing, and customer tracking. Abigail wasn't trying to revolutionize the industry, at least, not yet, but she wanted to solve the everyday problems of people who, like her father, worked tirelessly to keep their businesses afloat. The day she showed the prototype to her father, she was brimming with quiet pride. She walked into the shop, her laptop tucked under her arm, and found him adjusting a customer's laptop hinge. "Dad," she began cautiously, "I want to show you something." Arthur glanced up from his work, his brow furrowed. "What's this about, Abby? Another one of your experiments?" "Just give me a minute," she urged, setting up her laptop. She opened the program, its interface clean and intuitive, and began walking him through its features. It's designed for shops like ours, small businesses that need to manage inventory, invoices, and customer history. All in one place. Arthur's expression softened as she explained. He leaned closer, his interest piqued. "And you made this?" Abigail nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes. It's basic for now, but I think it could help us. And if it works here, maybe other shops will want it too." Arthur sat back, rubbing his chin. "Well, I'll be," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You might be onto something." It was the closest thing to praise Abigail had ever received from her father, and it lit a fire within her. They began using the software in the shop, and almost immediately, Arthur noticed its impact. Inventory errors decreased, invoices were processed faster, and customers were impressed by the professional touch. Word spread quickly among the local business community. Within a few months, Smith Tech wasn't just the go-to repair shop, it was also selling Abigail's software. She gave it a modest name, Smithies, a nod to her family's roots. Mia, away at university, heard about Abigail's progress during a phone call with their father. "She's turning this little shop into something else entirely," Arthur had said with an uncharacteristic note of pride. Maybe I underestimated her. But for Abigail, this was only the beginning. The success of Smithies gave her the confidence to think bigger, to dream of what Smith Tech could become. For the first time, she felt not just like an assistant in her father's shop, but like a contributor to something greater. She wasn't competing with Mia or seeking her father's approval anymore. She was building her own legacy, one piece of code at a time. Smith Tech Solutions was no longer a modest corner shop. Under Abigail's leadership, it had expanded into a bustling enterprise. The storefront was replaced by a sleek, modern office, and the small team of repair technicians had grown into a full-fledged staff of developers, designers, and business managers. Smithies had evolved into a suite of software products for small businesses, and Abigail was the quiet architect behind it all. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took years of long hours, relentless networking, and learning skills Abigail had never imagined she'd need: marketing, project management, even public speaking. While her father initially hesitated to hand over control, he eventually retired, allowing Abigail to take the reins fully. "You've earned it," he'd said, the words gruff but sincere. Mia, meanwhile, was thriving in her own way. After earning her degree from a prestigious university, she landed a high-paying corporate job in a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Her updates came through family calls and holiday visits, where she spoke about stock options, international travel, and the perks of corporate life. To their parents, Mia's success was the pinnacle of what the Smith family could achieve. Abigail's growing business, though impressive, still seemed humble by comparison. "Abby's done well with the shop," Arthur would say, almost as an afterthought in conversations with relatives. Abigail heard the faint praise and let it slide, focusing instead on the work that consumed her days and nights. Still, the divide between her and Mia grew wider. Family dinners became tense occasions, with conversations that skirted around the obvious tension. Mia's questions about Smith Tech always carried an edge of condescension. "So, how's the repair business?" Mia asked one Christmas, her tone casual but pointed. "It's not just repairs anymore," Abigail said, keeping her voice steady. "We're rolling out a new software platform for inventory management next quarter. Our early signups look promising." Mia replied, arching an eyebrow. "That's great." To Abigail, it felt like Mia had already dismissed her achievements before she could finish the sentence. Despite their strained relationship, Mia was always quick to share her own milestones, promotions, awards, and even her dream apartment in the heart of the city. Abigail congratulated her, swallowing the bitter taste of comparison. She told herself that they were on different paths, but it didn't make the sense of invisibility any easier to bear. Years later, when Smith Tech's profits skyrocketed, the dynamic shifted. The once humble repair shop turned tech company became a notable name in the small business software market. Investors called. Articles were written about the unlikely transformation of a family business. It wasn't long before Mia took notice. During a rare visit home, she cornered Abigail in the kitchen. "You've really made something out of Smith Tech," she said, her voice devoid of the usual sarcasm. "I've been thinking, maybe I could help." Abigail froze, the cutting board still in her hands. "Help?" With expansion, Mia continued. "You know, I've got connections, corporate experience. I could take things to the next level." The offer, though phrased as generous, stung Abigail. Where had Mia been during the late nights of coding, the struggle to secure funding, the relentless grind? Now that Smith Tech was a success, she wanted in? I appreciate the thought, Mia, Abigail said evenly. But we've already expanded without your help. Mia's smile faltered, the old tension simmering between them. I'm just saying you don't have to do it alone. But Abigail already had a team, a loyal one that had been there from the beginning. She didn't need Mia swooping in to take credit for what she had built brick by brick. That night, Abigail sat in her office, staring at the city skyline through her window. The rift between her and her sister had grown too wide to bridge with polite words. For the first time, Abigail wasn't sure if she even wanted to. The Smith Tech headquarters buzzed with the energy of a thriving company. Abigail's quiet leadership had nurtured a culture of innovation and collaboration. But that harmony was soon disrupted when Mia walked through the glass doors, her designer heels clicking against the polished floors. Mia's announcement came during a family dinner a month prior. I'm joining Smith Tech, she declared, her tone suggesting this was a foregone conclusion rather than a proposal. Corporate life has been great, but I want to be part of something that really matters. Our family's legacy. Abigail's fork had hovered midair, her appetite disappearing. She'd spent years cultivating Smith Tech into her vision. The thought of Mia, someone who had dismissed the business as a mere repair shop, now stepping into a leadership role made her stomach churn. Their father, however, had been thrilled. This is fantastic. Both my daughters working together. Imagine what you can achieve as a team. Abigail had reluctantly agreed, reasoning that perhaps Mia's corporate experience could add value to the company. She held on to a fragile hope that they might finally find common ground. But that hope quickly dimmed when Mia arrived and announced her first move, a rebranding campaign. Smith Tech needs a stronger image, she said during their first leadership meeting. We have to position ourselves as cutting-edge, innovative, and bold. And that starts with the people running the company. She unveiled glossy marketing materials featuring herself front and center, her sharp blazer and confident smile dominating every photo. Abigail's name was there, but only as a footnote. Mia, this isn't just about branding, Abigail said, keeping her voice steady despite the sting of being sidelined. Our clients trust us because of our expertise and reliability. That's what built this company. And now we're going to elevate it, Mia countered, flashing her trademark smile. Trust me, Abby, this is how the big players do it. Within weeks, Mia positioned herself as the co-CEO, a title she'd convinced their father to endorse. Abigail didn't argue. She was too focused on the company's operations to fight for recognition. But Mia's approach was grating. While Abigail worked on refining their software and managing the growing team, Mia became the public face of Smith Tech, delivering speeches, conducting interviews, and courting investors. At first, Abigail told herself it didn't matter. She preferred the background anyway, where real work happened. But it was hard to ignore the mounting tension. In meetings, Mia began to override her decisions, claiming her ideas were more strategic or market-focused. She dismissed Abigail's concerns about overpromising on delivery timelines, focusing instead on securing splashy partnerships. Abigail's warnings went unheeded, and cracks began to show in their workflow. The final straw came during a product launch event. The culmination of months of development, the event was Abigail's brainchild, meant to showcase Smith Tech's newest software. Yet when the promotional video played on the large screen, Mia's voice narrated the company's journey, framing herself as the driving force behind its success. Abigail sat in the audience, her heart sinking as she watched the story of her life's work rewritten in real time. When Mia took the stage to a standing ovation, Abigail clapped politely but felt the sting of betrayal deep in her chest. Later that night, back at her desk, Abigail stared at the framed photo of her father in the workshop, his hands steady as he guided her through her first repair job. Steady hands, Abby, she whispered to herself. She wasn't one for confrontations, but this was her company, her vision. And she wasn't about to let it slip away under Mia's polished veneer. It was time to remind everyone, including Mia, who had built Smith Tech from the ground up. The Smith Tech Anniversary Gala and their father Arthur's 60th birthday celebration were combined into a single grand event. The party, held in a glittering downtown ballroom, was a testament to Mia's flair for spectacle. The room buzzed with energy. Investors, business partners, and even local media had been invited. Abigail, standing near the bar, sipped her water and scanned the crowd. It felt more like a corporate PR event than a family celebration, but she kept her misgivings to herself. Mia had taken charge of the evening's arrangements, leaving Abigail with little to do but show up. "Don't worry about the details, Abby," Mia had said with her practiced smile. "You've done enough with the tech side. Let me handle the big picture." The evening started smoothly enough. Abigail shared quiet conversations with her father's old friends and longtime employees, many of whom had been with Smith Tech since its modest beginnings. Her father, beaming in his sharp new suit, greeted guests and received their congratulations. Despite the tensions of recent months, Abigail was determined to set aside her frustrations for the night. That resolve began to crumble when Mia took the stage midway through the evening. Abigail hadn't known there would be speeches, but it wasn't a surprise. Mia loved a microphone. "Good evening, everyone," Mia began, her voice commanding attention as the crowd settled. "Thank you all for joining us to celebrate not just our father's milestone, but also Smith Tech's incredible journey." She launched into a polished narrative about the company's rise from a small repair shop to a tech innovator. The words were eloquent, but Abigail noticed how selectively they were chosen. Mia's name was mentioned frequently as a catalyst for growth, but Abigail's contributions were glossed over, buried under vague phrases like family effort and joint leadership. Abigail clenched her fists, her heart pounding as the speech continued. "And now," Mia said, her voice lifting with excitement, "I'm thrilled to share some exciting news about Smith Tech's future. As we look toward new horizons and greater opportunities, the company will be moving forward under a singular, focused leadership, mine." Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by applause from those who didn't understand the implications. Abigail stood frozen, her glass trembling in her hand. "This decision was made with the utmost care," Mia continued. "Smith Tech's success demands a clear, unified direction, and I am committed to leading us into an even brighter future." Abigail felt the room spinning. She locked eyes with her father, who looked just as stunned. Mia hadn't consulted him, hadn't consulted anyone. Tonight, Mia added, is not just a celebration of the past, but of what's to come. "Thank you for believing in Smith Tech and in me." The applause grew louder as Mia stepped down from the stage, a triumphant smile on her face. Abigail pushed through the crowd, finding her father by the buffet table. "Did you know about this?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp with fury. Arthur shook his head, looking bewildered. "No, Abby. I don't know what she's doing." But Abigail knew. Mia wasn't just trying to lead, she was erasing her. Publicly, decisively. Mia appeared beside them, her champagne glass raised. "What did you think?" she asked, her tone casual, as though nothing was amiss. "What do I think?" Abigail's voice shook. "I think you just humiliated me in front of our family, our partners, and everyone who supported this company." "Abby, don't be dramatic," Mia said with a dismissive wave. "This is about the future of the company. You'll still have a place, of course. But leadership requires a certain presence, and you've always preferred the behind-the-scenes work." Abigail felt something snap. Years of swallowing her anger, of letting Mia take credit and overshadow her, came boiling to the surface. "Presence? Do you think a marketing smile is what built this company? I've spent years, building Smith Tech into what it is today. And you," she pointed a shaking finger at Mia. "You think you can just waltz in and claim it as your own?" Guests nearby turned to watch the unfolding scene, their murmurs adding to Abigail's humiliation. Mia's expression hardened, her voice dropping to a cold, cutting tone. "Abby, this is business. Not everyone can handle it." Abigail's chest tightened, the weight of the betrayal crushing her. Without another word, she turned and left the ballroom, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses fading behind her. That night, as she sat alone in her apartment, she realized there was no fixing her relationship with Mia. The sister she'd hoped to work alongside had instead become her rival. And if Mia wanted a fight, Abigail was ready to give her one. The drive home from the gala was a blur. Abigail's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing as she replayed Mia's words. By the time she reached her apartment, her fury had transformed into something sharper: focus. She wasn't going to shout, argue, or engage in a public spectacle. Mia wanted to play the face of the company, but Abigail held the heart of it, and she intended to remind everyone of that fact. After a quick shower to clear her head, Abigail settled at her desk, her laptop glowing in the dark room. She began gathering files, contracts, intellectual property agreements, and the original partnership documents she and her father had signed when he handed her the company reins. Mia might have charmed their father into her schemes, but she couldn't erase the hard, legal reality. Abigail owned 51% of SmithTech. More importantly, the software that had propelled their growth, Smithies, and every subsequent program, was her creation, protected under her name. Without it, SmithTech was just a repair shop with a fancy office. Abigail's fingers flew over the keyboard as she drafted an email, her words precise and measured. Subject: Important updates from SmithTech Solutions. To all SmithTech employees, clients, and partners, I want to personally thank each of you for your unwavering support and trust in SmithTech Solutions over the years. This company has been built on a foundation of innovation, integrity, and collaboration, values I hold dear as the majority owner and creator of the proprietary technology that drives our success. As we move forward, I want to assure you that these values will remain at the core of everything we do. Effective immediately, I am initiating a strategic realignment to ensure SmithTech continues to prioritize its founding principles and deliver the excellence you've come to expect. Your loyalty has been the cornerstone of our journey, and I am committed to upholding that trust. Further updates will follow soon. Warm regards, Abigail Smith, Founder and CEO, SmithTech Solutions. The email struck the perfect tone: calm, professional, yet unmistakably authoritative. She hit send, her pulse quickening as the message dispersed into inboxes across the company and beyond. Her next move was a private meeting with her attorney, a sharp and meticulous woman who had been instrumental in securing the intellectual property rights for Smithies. By morning, Abigail had begun the process of legally separating her software from SmithTech's broader operations. If Mia wanted to run the business her way, she'd have to do it without the tools that made it profitable. By dawn, Abigail felt a strange sense of calm. She wasn't just reacting to Mia's betrayal, she was reclaiming control. Her father might have been charmed by Mia's theatrics, but the employees, clients, and investors who relied on SmithTech for its innovation would see through the veneer soon enough. When Mia and Arthur woke to the fallout, confused employees, puzzled investors, and concerned clients, Abigail would be ready. She wasn't out to destroy SmithTech, she was out to rebuild it. This time on her terms. The next morning, the conference room at SmithTech was unusually quiet. The executive team, along with a handful of department heads, sat in tense silence as they awaited the arrival of Abigail, Mia, and Arthur. The night's events had sparked a flurry of confusion and speculation, fueled by Abigail's unexpected email and a flood of inquiries from clients. Mia, dressed in her usual power blazer, sat at the head of the table, a confident smirk on her face. Arthur was seated beside her, his expression a mix of concern and irritation. Abigail entered last, carrying a slim leather folder and her laptop. Unlike Mia, she had no flair for theatrics, but her calm demeanor carried an undeniable weight. "Let's get started," Abigail said, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table. Mia leaned back, her voice dripping with condescension. "Abby, what's this all about? Your email caused quite a stir, but I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. You know how these things can be blown out of proportion." Abigail didn't rise to the bait. She opened her folder and placed a series of documents on the table. "No misunderstandings here," she said evenly. "I thought it was time we clarified a few things." She passed the documents down the table, watching as Mia's smirk faded. The first page was a copy of the original ownership agreement, clearly showing Abigail as the majority owner with 51% of the company. Arthur shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Abby, what are you trying to do here? Abigail met her father's eyes, her voice unwavering. I'm protecting what I built. And I'm reminding everyone at this table that Smith Tech's success didn't happen by accident. It happened because of years of hard work, innovation, and leadership, my leadership. Before Mia or Arthur could interrupt, Abigail continued. The software that drives our revenue, Smithies and every derivative product, is owned solely by me. The licenses for those products, which keep our clients running and bring in 70% of our profits, are tied to my intellectual property rights. Those licenses are set to expire in 30 days. A murmur rippled through the room. Abigail didn't flinch. If I choose not to renew those licenses under Smith Tech, the software will no longer be available for use. And without that software, this company is nothing more than a repair shop with a fancy office. Mia's voice was sharp now, her confidence slipping. You can't just pull the software, Abby. That's ridiculous. Think about the clients. I have thought about them, Abigail said, cutting her off. Many of them have already reached out. They trust my expertise and my leadership. If necessary, I can migrate them to a new platform under my exclusive control. They're loyal to the product, not the name. Arthur leaned forward, his voice pleading. Abby, this is drastic. We're family, there's no need for threats. This isn't a threat, Abigail said, her tone steely. It's a choice. She leaned back, her gaze shifting between Mia and Arthur. You can remain part of Smith Tech as silent partners, retaining your shares and benefiting from the company's continued success. Or you can refuse and watch the company collapse. Either way, I will not tolerate being undermined or disrespected any longer. The room was silent. Mia's jaw tightened as she glared at Abigail. You're serious about this? Deadly serious, Abigail replied. Arthur looked to Mia, his face pale. Mia, maybe we should. No, Mia snapped, her voice rising. This is blackmail. She's trying to destroy everything we've worked for. Abigail's composure didn't falter. Everything I've worked for, she corrected. And I'm not destroying anything. I'm giving you a chance to step aside gracefully. The weight of her words hung in the air, the reality of the situation sinking in. Mia's protests faltered as the department heads exchanged uneasy glances, clearly siding with Abigail. Finally, Arthur sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. Mia, he said quietly, we can't win this. Mia's face twisted with anger, but she said nothing. I'll have the paperwork prepared by the end of the day, Abigail said, her voice calm but final. You'll remain shareholders, but effective immediately, I will be the sole CEO. No more co-leadership. No more interference. Mia shot her a venomous glare, but didn't argue further. Arthur simply nodded, his resignation clear. As Abigail left the conference room, she felt an unfamiliar sense of triumph. For years, she had stayed in the background, letting others take credit for her work. No more. Smith Tech was hers now. And she wasn't about to let anyone take it away again. The air in the Smith family's living room was heavy with unspoken words. It was Thanksgiving, the first holiday since Abigail had taken full control of Smith Tech. The usual warmth and laughter had been replaced with polite, stilted conversation, as though everyone were tiptoeing around a cracked foundation. Mia sat across the room, scrolling through her phone, barely engaging. After the fallout, she had relocated to Chicago for a new job at a rival tech company. Though she claimed the move was a fresh start, everyone knew it was her way of escaping the shadow of Smith Tech and her sister. Arthur, who had quietly retired after the boardroom showdown, sat near the fireplace. He looked older than his years, his once robust confidence dimmed by regret. Though he still loved both his daughters, he hadn't been able to bridge the chasm between them. His attempts to mediate had backfired, and he now kept his thoughts to himself, weary of reopening old wounds. Abigail had arrived late, bringing a homemade pie out of obligation rather than enthusiasm. Since assuming full control of Smith Tech, she had driven the company to new heights, launching groundbreaking software that solidified its position in the market. The accolades poured in, and investors clamored for a piece of her vision. She should have been elated. But the empty chair at the table, symbolizing the bond she had lost with her sister, was a constant reminder of what success had cost her. "Abby," Arthur said cautiously as she sat down, "how's the company?" "I read about the new partnership in the paper." "Impressive." "It's doing well," Abigail replied, her tone neutral. "We've expanded into 5 new markets this quarter." "That's great," he said, offering a small smile. "I'm proud of you." The words felt genuine, but they rang hollow to Abigail. She nodded politely, unwilling to reopen the emotional wounds of their last confrontation. Across the table, Mia finally looked up. "Congratulations," she said flatly. "I'm sure the investors are thrilled." "Thank you," Abigail replied, matching her sister's tone. The conversation fizzled, leaving only the sound of cutlery scraping plates. Holidays had become a ritual of strained politeness. The once close family was now a collection of individuals walking on eggshells. Abigail and Mia exchanged obligatory updates, but the warmth of sisterhood was long gone. Arthur tried to smooth things over with light-hearted jokes, but even he seemed to know it was a losing battle. After dinner, as Abigail prepared to leave, Arthur followed her to the door. "Abby," he said, his voice low, "I want you to know. I didn't handle things well. I should have supported you sooner. I see that now." Abigail turned to face him, her expression softening. "I appreciate that, Dad," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "But some things can't be undone." He nodded, his eyes heavy with sadness. "I just hope you and Mia can find a way to heal someday." Abigail didn't respond. She wanted to believe it was possible, but too much had been said and done. As she drove home, the city lights blurring through her windshield, Abigail couldn't shake the ache in her chest. She had achieved everything she had ever dreamed of professionally, yet the cost had been higher than she had ever imagined. Smith Tech thrived under her leadership, its success undeniable. But her family remained fractured, a painful reminder that even victory could leave scars. The quiet hum of the Smith Tech headquarters late at night was soothing to Abigail. The office was mostly empty, save for a few dedicated employees working on last-minute projects. From her corner office, Abigail looked out over the glittering city skyline, her desk cluttered with papers and accolades. The company was thriving more than thriving. It was the envy of the industry, a household name in small business software, and a testament to her relentless drive. But as she stared out at the lights, Abigail felt a hollowness she couldn't shake. The past year had been a whirlwind of achievements. Smith Tech had grown into new markets, launched 2 more successful software platforms, and earned multiple industry awards. Abigail had become a respected figure in tech, often featured in magazines and invited to speak at conferences. Her name carried weight now, no longer overshadowed by anyone. And yet, the victory felt incomplete. She leaned back in her chair, her thoughts drifting to the past. Long nights in the small repair shop with her father, the sound of tools clicking as she worked on old machines. The love of building, of solving problems, had been her foundation. Back then, her only ambition had been to contribute something meaningful, to prove her worth quietly through action. But the path she'd taken had led to something far different. The showdown with Mia, the fractured family ties, the relentless drive to prove herself, it had all been fueled by anger, by a need to be seen. Now, as the dust settled, Abigail realized she had spent so much time fighting battles that she hadn't stopped to enjoy her victories. It wasn't just Smith Tech that had flourished, it was Abigail herself. Her resilience, she realized, wasn't just a response to being underestimated. It was a part of who she was. The quiet strength she had honed over the years had carried her through every challenge, every betrayal. She had proven to herself that she could thrive, regardless of what others thought. And perhaps, she thought, that was enough. The next morning, Abigail arrived at the office early, carrying a stack of handwritten notes. Her assistant, Angela, looked up in surprise. "You're here early," Angela said. "Big plans?" Abigail smiled. "Just something I've been thinking about for a while." She walked into the main conference room and began pinning the notes to a whiteboard. They weren't about sales figures or product launches. They were ideas for fostering a better company culture. Notes on mentorship programs, initiatives for mental health support, and ways to give back to the community. When her leadership team arrived, they found Abigail standing by the board, her demeanor calm but determined. "We've achieved incredible things," she began, "but I want to make sure we're not just growing as a company. I want us to grow as people." Her team listened intently as she laid out her vision, a company that wasn't just about innovation, but about supporting its employees, giving back, and creating something lasting beyond profits. By the end of the meeting, Abigail felt lighter. She wasn't letting go of her drive, but she was channeling it into something greater. She no longer needed to prove herself through revenge or competition. Her worth wasn't tied to her battles with Mia or anyone else. It was tied to the legacy she would leave behind, not just for Smith Tech, but for herself. That evening, as she locked up her office, Abigail paused to look at the skyline again. The hollowness had started to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. She was no longer the girl in the shadow of her sister. She was Abigail Smith, builder, leader, and survivor. And her story was far from over. Years later, Abigail Smith stood on a stage in front of a packed auditorium. The event was a conference on women in leadership, and she had been invited as the keynote speaker. The room buzzed with anticipation as Abigail approached the podium, her calm presence commanding the room. Her story had become more than just her own. Business schools dissected it as a case study in resilience, cautioning about the perils of underestimating quiet strength. Her rise to prominence had been marked by personal sacrifice, but her ability to rebuild, not just her company but herself, was what resonated most with people. "Good evening," Abigail began, her voice steady. "When I started this journey, I didn't know I was writing a story worth sharing. I was just a girl fixing computers in the back of my father's shop. But sometimes, the things that humble us, being overlooked, underestimated, become the very forces that shape us into something extraordinary." The audience was silent, captivated by her sincerity. She spoke of her early days at Smith Tech, the challenges of being overshadowed, the painful rift with her family, and the lessons she'd learned. But Abigail didn't dwell on bitterness or regret. Instead, she focused on the growth that had come from those moments, the wisdom she'd gained by choosing to move forward rather than stay mired in revenge. "Resilience isn't about being unbreakable," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's about being willing to rebuild, no matter how many times you're knocked down. It's about realizing that your worth isn't tied to what others see in you, but to what you see in yourself." After the speech, a line formed to meet her. Young entrepreneurs, seasoned professionals, and even students approached her with questions, seeking guidance. Abigail answered each one thoughtfully, her experience now a source of strength for others. Smith Tech had long since moved from being a family business to an industry leader, but Abigail's role had shifted too. She had stepped back from day-to-day operations, entrusting the company to a team she had mentored personally. Her focus now was on mentorship and philanthropy, helping others find their voices and paths, just as she had. Her relationship with Mia and her father remained distant but civil. They exchanged polite greetings during holidays and occasionally discussed family matters, but the closeness of the past was gone. Abigail had made peace with that, understanding that not every wound could heal. One evening, after a particularly rewarding mentoring session, Abigail returned to her home, a quiet, sunlit space filled with books, plants, and photographs of Smith Tech milestones. As she poured herself a cup of tea, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. For years, she had been driven by the need to prove herself, to fight against being overlooked. But now, she realized that the real triumph wasn't in defeating others, it was in building something meaningful and sharing it with the world. She opened her notebook and began sketching out her next project, a foundation for young women in tech. It would be her way of ensuring that others wouldn't have to fight the same battles alone. Abigail smiled as she wrote the foundation's name at the top of the page, Hidden Strengths Initiative. Her story was no longer about revenge or even resilience. It was about the legacy she was leaving behind. Growth, wisdom, and the quiet power of building others up had replaced the desire to prove anything. As she set down her pen, the peace she felt wasn't fleeting. It was the kind that came from knowing she had turned every hardship into a stepping stone, creating a path others could follow. Abigail Smith had found her purpose. And with it, she had found herself.